So good day to everyone. So for the first lesson, we're going to talk about philosophy. So its etymology comes from the Greek word philos, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. That's why philosophy is a love of wisdom. It is the study of the basic fundamental of life, knowledge, reality, existence, morality, human nature, and many more through the use of logic and reason. As an academic discipline, it does not provide ultimate answers despite the ultimate nature of philosophical ideas. It as well opens the mind of people, encourages individuals to ask questions and to seek answers for themselves. Philosophy is a tenacious attempt of reasoning men to think through the most fundamental issues of life, to reach reasonable conclusions on first and last things, to suggest worthwhile goals that can command loyalty of individuals and groups. And philosophy is a search of comprehensive view of nature, an attempt at a universal explanation of nature of things. It is the science of sciences and encourages students to philosophize. According to other authors, philosophy is a philosophical process of solving more characteristic methods from a characteristic attitude and arriving at a characteristic conclusion and results. And whenever philosophy has been assumed that it signified achieving a wisdom that would influence the conduct of life. The history of philosophy is an approach that can be employed. It grounds the ideas to the context of the philosophers. It shows the development of philosophy alongside with the development of human discovery and knowledge. It grounds contemporary ideas, can provide an object presentation of philosophical ideas, and it can also be a ground or basis for other approaches. The ancient philosophy was originated in the Greek city-states along the coast Asia Minor, around 600 BC, and it includes the three periods which is the pre-Socratics, ancient triumvirate, and post-Aristotelian. Pre-Socratics are the group of early Greek philosophers, most of whom were born before Socrates, whose attention to question about the origin and nature of the physical world has led to their being called cosmologists or naturalists. The pre-Socratics were 6th and 5th century BCE Greek thinkers who introduced a new way of inquiring to the world on the place of human beings in it. They were recognized in antiquity as the first philosophers and scientists of the Western tradition. They emphasized the rational unity of things and rejected supernatural explanations, seeking natural principles at work in the world and human society. The pre-Socratics saw the world as a cosmos, an ordered arrangement that could be understood via rational inquiry. The first triumvirate of ancient Rome was an uneasy alliance between the three titans Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, which from 60 BCE until 53 BCE dominated the politics of the Roman Republic. Alliances have always been part of history, whether one links to the unification of Sparta and Athens against the Persians in the 5th century BCE or the allied forces of the Triple Entity in the World War I. Nations and individuals, even former enemies, have sought assistance for one reason or another to overcome a common foe. Ancient Rome was no different. An unstable republic and a near civil war brought three men to set aside their differences and even contempt for one another to join forces and dominate the government of Rome. Even controlling elections for nearly a decade, one of the three would eventually rise above the other and become dictator. The death of Aristotle marks the end of the golden age of the Greek philosophy. From Thales to Socrates was the period of beginning, from Socrates to Aristotle the period of the highest perfection, and the opening of the post-Aristotelian period begins the age of decay and dissolution. To this third period belong the Pantheism of the Stoics and the materialism of the Epicureans, and the final relaxation of all earnest philosophical thought, culminating in the absolute scepticism of the Pyrrhonists. The period of the highest perfection in philosophy was also the period of the political weakness of Greece, and the causes of which brought about the political downfall of Greece are in part accountable for the decay of Greek philosophy. To understand more about these three periods in ancient philosophy, full information will be followed, so listen carefully and pay attention.
Ancient philosophy happened around 1000 BC to 500 AD. Philosophy means love of wisdom. The philosophy originated in the Greek city-states along the coast of Asia Minor around 600 BC. It was because they were not as bound by tradition as city-states on mainland Greece. Also, it was because they were constantly in touch with the ancient science and speculation of the Middle East. They were, in short, more open to intellectual innovation and speculation than counterparts on the mainland. On ancient philosophy, there are three periods: the pre-Socratics, the ancient triumvirate, and lastly, the post-Aristotelians.
Long ago, some philosophers worked very hard to separate myths from what they actually knew about nature. These natural philosophers tried their best to separate myth from truth. They developed first draft of many of the methods we still use and value in the present. This is Rafael P. Valderrama II of 1 BS Biology B. So today, we're going to talk about the pre-Socratic period. And let's meet the pre-Socratics. So the Greeks practiced natural philosophy. This means that it is a self-conscious inquiry into nature. The pre-Socratic period of ancient era of philosophy refers to Greek philosophers active before Socrates. So the name itself, pre, it means before. So these philosophers were there before Socrates. And it is a contemporaries of Socrates, so expounded on the earlier knowledge. They include the following major philosophers such as Thales of Miletus, Anaximander, Anaximenes, Pythagoras, Heraclitus, Parmenides of Elea, Anaxagoras, Empedocles, Zeno of Elea, Protagoras, Gorgias, and Democritus. So the pre-Socratic philosophers rejected traditional mythological explanations of the phenomena they saw around them in favor of more rational explanations. They started to ask questions like, where did everything come from? And why is there such variety? And how can nature be described mathematically? They tended to look for universal principles to explain the whole of nature. Although they are arguably more important for the questions they ask than the answers they arrive at, problems and paradoxes they identified become the basis of later mathematical, scientific, and philosophic studies. So first, we have Thales of Miletus. So Thales of Miletus was an early pre-Socratic philosopher. He is a mathematician and an astronomer from the Greek city of Miletus in Ionia. It's a modern day called the Turkey. He was one of the so-called seven sages of Greece, and many regard him as the first philosopher in the Western tradition. So here's an example. Thales set the natural world off as separate from the divine for him. The word was something comprehensible with the powers of the human intellect. It became an object, a thing, or like other things. For example, Thales held that wind, not a god, caused the Nile to flood. This was a general and natural explanation for a phenomenon. So again, the pre-Socratic philosophers separate the divine from a natural phenomena. So by this example, he conclude that the reason why the Nile River floods, it is because of the wind that pushes it, and it is not because of God. So many of us, even as the Filipinos, we believe that the God from above causes some things to happen. Maybe he's angry or what. So if you were living in this era, philosophers will tell you that it is the wind that causes the river to flood. It is not the God. So Thales is also the founder of the Milesian school of natural philosophy. It is also a teacher of Anaximander. So later on, we're going to talk about Anaximander. So what is the school of Milesians? So it was not accidentally the first Western philosophers. Pre-Socratics were citizens of Miletus, a prosperous trading center of Ionian Greeks on the Asiatic coast, where Greek and Oriental cultures met and mingled. So again, Thales was the founder of the first European school of philosophy, the Milesians. It was known for its theory of matter. So what is this theory? So this theory held that water was the primary substrate, or the most basic element. He concluded that the earth floats on water like a ship. So when earthquake happens, the water rocks back and forth. So for Thales, the basic element is water. He believes that the land floats on water. So the reason why there is an earthquake, it is because when the water rocks back and forth, maybe it is a wave or what. So that's what he believes. That's why there is an earthquake. So again, kasi nga 'di ba, pre-Socratic philosophers believe in a natural phenomena. They believe that it is not because of a god that this thing happens. So he comes with these conclusions that the reason why there is an earthquake, it is because of the water rocks back and forth. So next we have Anaximander. So Anaximander was an early pre-Socratic philosopher from the Greek city of Miletus in Ionia. It is now called the Turkey. He was a key figure in the Milesian school as a student of Thales and a teacher of Anaximenes and Pythagoras. So later on, we're going to talk about Anaximenes and Pythagoras. So Anaximander was an early proponent of science, is sometimes considered to be the first true scientist. So Anaximander, just like Thales, believes that nature has discoverable laws. But Anaximander rejected the universal watery substrate of Thales. Instead, he introduced a formless initial called the apeiron. And also, Anaximander worked in astronomy, geometry, and mathematics. So one of his big contribution is this gnomon. So this device helped Greece to cast shadow on it. No, it has helped to record time, also to record the movement of sun. But later on, this device helped also Anaximander to introduce also his model of cosmos. Okay, so next we have Empedocles. So Empedocles was a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher, usually considered a member of poorly defined pluralist school, and that he was eclectic in his thinking and combined much that had been suggested by others. He is perhaps known as for the originator of cosmogenic theory of the four classical elements of the ancient world, which are the earth, air, fire, and water, which became the standard dogma for much of the next 2,000 years. Is also credited with several pre-science ideas in physics which have since proved quite prophetic. Okay, so next we have Pythagoras of Samos. So Pythagoras was an early Greek pre-Socratic philosopher and a mathematician from Greek island of Samos. He was a founder of the influential philosophical and religious movement or cult called the Pythagoreanism. And he was probably the first man to actually call himself as a philosopher or a lover of wisdom. Pythagoras, or in a broader sense of Pythagoreans, allegedly exercised an important influence on the work of Plato. As a mathematician, he is known as the founder of, or the father of numbers, or as the first pure mathematician, and is the best known for his Pythagorean theorem on the relation between sides of a right triangle, the concept of square numbers and the square roots, and the discovery of the golden ratio. So Pythagoras came up with the idea of introducing the idealism. So idealists generated abstract models of a perfect stuff. Okay, so last we have Democritus. So Democritus was known as the laughing philosopher. He was a pre-Socratic philosopher from a Thrace in northern Greece. Along with his teacher Leucippus, he was the founder of Greek philosophical school of atomism, where they developed a materialist account of the natural world. Although he was a contemporary of Socrates, he usually considered pre-Socratic in that his philosophy and his approach were more similar to other pre-Socratic thinkers than to Socrates and Plato. Okay, so Democritus comes up with the ideas that all things around us are made of atoms, and this thing was called the atomism. Okay, so Democritus believes that these atoms are somehow indestructible, uncreated, always in motion, and has an infinite number, and they came in different kinds of shapes and sizes. So Democritus was a materialist like Milesians. Okay, so those philosophers I mentioned lately were the philosophers highlights in this pre-Socratic period. So again, this is Rafael Valderrama of 1BS Biology, and we're going to listen to the next presentation of my classmates. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shaina Uganap from 1BS Bio B. I'm here to report my research about one of the well-known philosophers, Socrates. Socrates was a Greek philosopher from Athens who is credited as a founder of Western philosophy and the first moral philosopher of the ethical tradition of thought. Socrates, best known for his most famous figure in world history for his contribution to the development of ancient Greek philosophy, which provided the foundation for all Western philosophy. He is in fact known as the father of Western philosophy for this reason. Socrates was originally a sculptor who seems to have also had a number of other occupations, including soldier, before he was told by the oracle at Delphi that he was the wisest man in the world. In an effort to prove that the oracle was wrong, he embarked on a new career of questioning those who were said to be wise and, in doing so, proved that the oracle was correct. Socrates was the wisest man in the world because he did not claim to know anything of importance. His most famous student was Plato, who would honor his name through the establishment of a school in Athens, and more so through the philosophical dialogues he wrote featuring Socrates as the central character. Whether Plato's dialogues accurately represent Socrates' teachings continued to be debated, but a definitive answer is unlikely to be reached. Plato's best-known student was Aristotle of Stagira, who would then tutor Alexander the Great and establish his own school. By this progression, Greek philosophy, as first developed by Socrates, was spread throughout the known world during and after Alexander's conquest. What were Socrates' beliefs? Although he never outright rejected the standard Athenian view of religion, Socrates' beliefs were nonconformist. He often referred to God rather than the gods and reported being guided by an inner divine voice. Three teachings of Socrates. These principles are what Socrates thought were the most important goals of philosophy. First is discover and pursue your life purpose. Strive to discover who you are, what is your life mission, and what you are trying to become. Second is care for your soul. And third, be a good person. You will not be a good person and you will not be harmed by other forces. What are Socrates' four principles? First principle was the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to create a virtue concept that an individual could use to mold her character on in a long-term self-cultivation, being assured that each step in such molding would make her more admirable person. The second principle is the ultimate basis of this reasoning. The ultimate basis of this personal perception of what is admirable and not admirable in very clear concrete cases. Each individual should be confident that she can recognize what is admirable and not admirable when she sees it in very clear and concrete cases. Third principle, the negative, critical use of concrete stories. In Plato's Republic, Polemarchus initially thinks that the general principle, return to each what belongs to him, is a definition of right-mindedness. But when he reflects on Socrates' counterexample, story about the man gone insane, he realizes that his personal perception in this concrete case conflicts with his belief in this general principle. fourth principle is analogy and participation. Inductive Socratic reasoning can also use concrete example of positive admirable external behavior in order to make generalization about internal character traits that constitute the essential essence of a virtue. What are the 10 contributions of Socrates? The 10 contributions of Socrates are the happiness mantra, the purpose of life, moral reasoning, the system of governance, reformed education system, Socrates and learning, the immortality of soul, human knowledge, Socratic irony, and Socratic method. What are the 12 contributions and principles of Socrates? First is the Socratic technique, philosophical belief, Socratic paradox, learning, righteousness, governmental issues, better to suffer an injustice than to commit one, human wisdom, Socratic debate and basic reasoning, Socratic ethics, Socratic irony, and the care of the soul. What are the Socrates virtues? Socrates introduces and describes the 4 chief virtues needed for justice to thrive in polis. He presents them as courage, moderation, justice, and wisdom. The greatest contribution of Socrates in philosophy is his dialect method of inquiry, known as the Socratic method or method of elenchus, which he largely applied to the examination of key morals, concepts such as the good and justice. It was his first described by Plato in the Socratic dialogues. The Socratic method. The Socratic method was derived from the Greek philosopher Socrates. In order to delve into a student's view, he would ask them questions until any contradictions were exposed. Socrates also used this method of questioning to encourage people to question the things they were told and to look beyond the obvious. The death of Socrates. The death of Socrates is in 399 BCE. As reported by Plato in the Phaedo, is usually attributed to poisoning with common hemlock. His progressive centripetal paralysis is characteristic of that poison. The death of Socrates happened purposely. Socrates thought that he would not like to shut his tongue about telling the truth to people. Everywhere I went will speak about the truth. So for this reason, he would like to drink a cup of poison rather than exiling from his city. Many people view Socrates as heroic because of his insistence that discussion and debate are always preferable to bloodshed of the battlefield as a method of resolving differences. Whether a hero or a heretic, he devoted his entire life, literally until his last breath, to philosophical exhortations and encouraged all denizens to follow suit.
Plato, 427 to 327 before Christ era or BCE. Alam kong napaka-pamilyar na si Plato sa inyo, pero sino nga ba si Plato? Plato was very famous as he was introduced to us during our high school days and some even know him during their elementary days. It is because Plato made contributions in the fields of science, math, and philosophy. Who is Plato? Plato was a classical Greek philosopher, mathematician, and a writer of different philosophical dialogues. A little background of Plato's biography. The exact birth date of Plato was unknown. Based on ancient sources, most modern scholars estimate that Plato was born in Athens 427 BC in an aristocratic family. His father was Ariston. According to a disputed tradition, Ariston traces descent from the king of Athens and the king of Mycenae. Plato's mother's family boasted of their relationship with the famous lawmaker and lyric poet Solon, and Plato himself was the fourth kid in the family. According to history, Aristocles was the birth name of Plato, pero huwag kayong malito kay Aristotle. Plato was only his nickname that was dubbed by his wrestling coach because of his broad and robust figure. Plato traveled in Italy, and Egypt to realize his aristocratic political dream. When Plato returned to Athens on 387 BCE, he founded the Academy, or the first higher learning institution in the Western world. Along with his mentor Socrates and his student Aristotle, Plato helped to lay a foundation of Western philosophy and science, even math. Kung pamilyar po kayo sa Platonic solids or yung three-dimensional shapes, which is ginamit po ni Plato as a representation of the universe, yun po yung isang contribution niya sa field of math. As we all know, Socrates was the teacher of Plato, and Aristotle was the student of Plato. Socrates never written down his philosophy, so Plato was the one who writes his philosophies, and that's why modern philosophers had a hard time determining or differentiating Plato and Socrates' ideas. Plato's ethics. Plato believed that humans consist of conflicting elements, also known as the three parts of soul, self, and psyche. The first one is reason or the intellect, physical appetite or the will, and the last one is spirit or the passion. Reason is the divine essence that let us think, also known as the wisdom. This let us make wise choices, and this help us in understanding the eternal truth. The physical appetite accounts for our biological needs such as hunger, thirst, and even sexual desire. The spirit or passion accounts for our basic emotions such as love, ambition, anger, empathy, and aggressiveness. According to Plato, most people live their life allowing reason, physical appetite or will, and spirit or passion to be in conflict with one another. And to avoid this conflict, Plato said that ideal living is when the intellect controls the passion through the will. Now, let's move on to Plato's metaphysics. Plato divided the reality into two realms, or also called the two aspects of reality, which is the visible world or the physical world, and the realm of forms or the realm of ideas. The visible world as defined by Plato is imperfect. It is the world that was experienced by our senses, which is the sight, the hearing, the taste, smell, and touch. It is physical, bound by space and time, and always changing. Realm of forms, on the other hand, is the perfect, the ultimate reality. It is non-physical, it was not bounded by space and time, and it never changed. Plato did a lot of work to change how we view the world, and his most influential contributions in philosophy was the theory of forms. Theory of forms asserts that our physical world is not the real world. Instead, ultimate reality exists beyond our physical world. To have a further understanding of the concept, let me give you a specific example. Think of a square. Now, draw a picture of it on a piece of paper. I will also try to draw a square on a piece of paper. Our pictures would be a little bit different. The lines aren't exactly straight or the angles aren't exactly 90 degrees. In addition, your picture and my picture would be different from each other. Different sizes, different color, and etc. To put it in Plato's terms, our picture resides in the physical realm or the physical world. Despite the imperfections and differences, there is something about our picture that unites them. So what exactly unites our picture? That makes our picture similar is the form of square. You and I share a similar concept or idea of what a square is, even though our square or our picture of square turned out differently. To put it in Plato's terms, the concept and idea of square resides in the realm of form and is therefore perfect, abstract, and unchanging. Plato would say that the form of square is more real than the physical drawing of a square. As we have mentioned earlier, Plato was a well-known writer of philosophical dialogues. and Plato has approximately 30 works of dialogues. One of it is the Republic. In the Republic, Plato explains the route towards the knowledge and the responsibility of philosophers through an allegory about the prisoners in a cave. So, let's imagine a cave in which prisoners are chained and seated so that they all face one way, which is towards a wall. The prisoners have been there all their lives and know nothing about the outside world. All that the prisoners see is that the shadows that cast on the wall before them. Behind the prisoners is a fire that they cannot see, that casts the shadows on the wall before them. Between the fire and the prisoners is a parapet, or a walkway where people cross back and forth with strange objects above their head. Everything that the prisoner see or hear is bounced off the wall. They therefore think that as the true reality. Now, suppose one of the prisoner is unshackled or led away up out of the cave and out into the world outside. The prisoner will probably object and when outside will be blinded by the light. But in time, the released prisoner will realize that it is the world outside that is real and the life in the cave is only an illusion. If then, the prisoner is led back into the cave and is placed in his original position, the other prisoners would mock him if he told them of the world outside and think him as a fool, and they would object anyone else being led away. So, from the Republic, the prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun, and the journey upwards is the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world. The prisoner who is released and attains a full understanding of what is real, or he will become a philosopher, he will have the responsibility to return to the cave and instruct others to what is real, so that they too may escape into the world of truth. For Plato, the philosopher has the ability to enlighten the uneducated. Plato's allegory of the cave illustrates these two things. First, it represents Plato's accounts for the true nature of reality and his understanding of the essence. Second, it's a lesson in what philosophy does, which is to reveal the true nature of things. Because without philosophy, we would remain in the dark. Plato and politics. Plato always wanted to enter politics, and he never agreed that democracy brings harmony. That's why he presented his ideal state or ideal society based on his ethics, based on the three parts of the soul. In Plato's ideal state, there are three major classes corresponding to the three parts of the soul. The guardians, rulers or the philosophers that govern the city, the auxiliaries or the warriors that protect it, and the lowest class is the worker that is responsible for producing. Example is the farmers, artisans, and etc. Plato believed that there could be a body of knowledge whose attainment would make it possible to completely heal the political problems. Plato died in 327 BC, leaving the academy. The academy remained a model for institution of higher learning until Emperor Justinian closed it.
Good day, everyone. One of the three triumvirate in ancient philosophy is Aristotle. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE at Stagira, Greece. His father was a Macedonian doctor. When he was 7, he went to study at Plato's academy and considered as one of the Plato's best students. Later, he returned to Athens to open a school called Lyceum. It is the first scientific institute based in Athens, Greece. Aristotle died 322 BCE at Chalcis, Greece. So here's a brief history of Aristotle. He was a Greek philosopher and polymath, a student of Plato and teacher of Alexander the Great. His writings cover many subjects including physics, metaphysics, poetry, theater, music, logic, rhetoric, linguistics, politics, government, ethics, biology, and zoology. The first to classify areas of human knowledge into distinct disciplines such as mathematics, biology, and ethics. He was the first to devise a formal system of reasoning, whereby the validity of an argument is determined by its structure rather than its content. Now, let us know the word tabula rasa. What does it mean and how it is related to Aristotle? The idea of tabula rasa is used by some philosophers regarding how, according to their vision, people are born with a mind blank. This theory indicates that a human being has no innate skills or knowledge, but must develop them from the experience and from learning. Aristotle was one of the thinkers who postulated the notion of tabula rasa. For the Greek, the knowledge is generated by sensory perception, which is then processed by the intellect, and so the concepts. Therefore, at birth, there is no knowledge, but it is generated over time. Aristotle said that the theoretical sciences are capable of being understood by principles which are certain and cannot be other than they are. As objects of the study, their subject matters are necessary and eternal. Reproductive sciences and practical sciences are capable of being understood by principles that are less than certain. As objects of study, their subject matters are contingent. Aristotle's Metaphysics. Aristotle's editors gave the name metaphysics to his work on first philosophy, either because they went beyond or followed after his physical investigations. Aristotle begins by sketching the history of philosophy. For Aristotle, philosophy arose historically after basic necessities were secured. It grew out of a feeling of curiosity and wonder to which religious myth gave. For metaphysics, Aristotle contends that it is the concrete, particular, actual, and individual objects or things that are real. You are a particular, a dog is a particular, an ant is a particular. Thus, for Aristotle, metaphysics is the study of particular, individual concrete substances. Next, Aristotle's four causes. First, material cause, that out of which it is made. Second, efficient cause, the source of the object's principle of change or stability. Third, formal cause, the essence of the object. And lastly, the final cause, it is the end or goal of the object or what the object is good for. For example, what is a house? For the material cause, it is the material that make up the thing. In this picture, bricks are the material cause of a brick house. Next is the efficient cause. It is the cause that changes the materials into a thing. So for this illustration, the efficient cause are the tools or instruments in building a brick house. Next is the formal cause. It is the form of a thing. These are the pattern, shape, or characteristics. And lastly is the final cause. It is the reason, purpose, or a goal of a thing. For this illustration, the purpose of this house is to provide shelter for the people. The golden mean. To avoid extremes, the counsel of moderation in all things. So this illustration is the golden mean between cowardice and recklessness. So as you can see, the illustration shows the cowardness at the other side and recklessness at the other side, but there is a courage in between them. When overwhelmed by fear, we're tempted to yield to cowardice. When we fail to give due respect to our fears, we can take unnecessary risks and become reckless. Many of us have become so shocked by a fear of failure that we fold our hands and do nothing. Whether it be for pursuing a career or a special relationship, the fear becomes more real than the possibility of success. The solution is to take action, which requires courage. Ethics, virtuous life. First, know what is right, do what is right, practical wisdom, contemplation of the best things, not just good things. Motivation for doing anything is flourishing. Next, the pursuit of happiness as the exercise of virtue. Aristotle tells us that the most important factor in the effort to achieve happiness is to have a good moral character, what he calls complete virtue. He is happy who lives in accordance with complete virtue and is sufficiently equipped with external goods, not for some chance period, but throughout a complete life. Nicomachean Ethics 1101A10. Thus, happiness is the ultimate end and purpose of human experience. Happiness is not pleasure, nor is it virtue. It is the exercise of virtue. Happiness cannot be achieved until the end of one's life. Hence, it is a goal and not a temporary state. Happiness is the perfection of human nature. Since man is a rational animal, human happiness depends on the exercise of his reason. Happiness depends on acquiring a moral character, where one displays the virtues of courage, generosity, justice, friendship, and citizenship in one's life. Those virtues involve striking a balance or mean between an excess and a deficiency. Happiness requires intellectual contemplation, for this is the ultimate realization of our rational capacities. Here are some of Aristotle's most profound quotes to help enrich your life. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is a habit. We think in pictures. If you wish to change what you think, change the picture. Love is composed of a single soul inhabiting two bodies. You will never do anything in the world without courage. It is the greatest quality of the mind next to honor. 5. Happiness depends upon ourselves.
Post-Aristotelian is also known as the third period. It is where the death of Aristotle marks the end of the golden age of Greek philosophy. From Thales to Socrates was the period of beginnings. From Socrates to Aristotle, the period of highest perfection. With the openings of the post-Aristotelian period begins the age of decay and dissolution. Post-Aristotelian philosophies. First is Stoicism. Stoicism is a school of philosophy that hails from ancient Greece and Rome in the early parts of the 3rd century before Christ. It is one of the famous school of thought during this period because Stoics provided compelling answers to anxiety, stress, fear, and troubling questions. Its principal focus was how to live a virtuous life to maximize happiness and reduce negative emotions. Second is hedonism. Hedonism is a belief that pleasures is the most important thing in life. The name derives from the Greek word hedon, which means pleasures. It involves enjoyment, satisfaction, and happiness. Hedonism refers to a family of theories, all of which have in common that pleasures plays a central role in them.
Theories of hedonism.
Psychological hedonism. All people pursue pleasure. This is not the way people ought to be, but this is the way they are. They naturally seek for pleasure. Example of this are liberty, peace, and education are all desirable. Next is ethical hedonism. Whether or not people pursue for pleasure, they should or ought to do so. A right action is pleasure and a wrong action is a production of pain. People will, however, get pleasure in different ways. For example, winning a battle and winning a soccer game could be the same pleasure.
Lastly, motivational hedonism.
Only pleasure and pain motivate people to do or not to do things. They are only motivated by things that are going to increase pleasure and decrease pain.
Last philosophy of post-Aristotelian is Epicureanism.
Epicureanism was founded in 306 before Christ by Epicurus, a Greek philosopher. This religion thought that virtue should be followed because it leads to happiness and that good was pleasure and evil was pain. What it means to say is that pleasure should be defined as being nothing better than a peace of mind and the absence of pain. I think that's a wrap, and that's end our reporting. Thank you, and God bless everyone. See you soonest!